as we say here, lean into what God has for you. Amen. And let's just love on God this morning. Amen. Amen.
Thanks. Okay, good morning. Talked about praying for your seats and if you're in your uncomfortable spot. So I hope somebody prayed for like right here or anywhere around here, because this is definitely my uncomfortable spot. This morning, I was preparing a little bit, and this statement jumped out at me, and you'll understand why a little bit later in my talk, why this is a little unusual for me. But I wrote this down. This has nothing to do with my talk, but somebody needs to hear this. If the difference that Jesus makes doesn't make a difference, then what difference does it make? So if you want to write that down, or if you want to copy this, that's fine. I'm really confused by it, but I'm gonna read this, study it, figure out what it means, and then who knows, maybe I'll be back up here. If the difference that Jesus makes doesn't make a difference, then what difference does it make? So I have no idea who needs to hear that, but maybe somebody does. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, and then we're going to get into kind of a little bit of some stories here. But the topic today is heaven on earth. And right now, kind of in this stage of Kim and I's life, this is kind of how we see heaven on earth. This is our grandson. This is Parker. He's 7 months old today. So yeah, just a little shout out. He's a lot better looking than I am. So if you want to just look at him while I'm talking, that's totally fine with me. And I'll just blend in up here. So I tend to move around and talk with my hands. So I'm going to try to keep the microphone close. So if you can't hear me, raise your hand and I'll move it closer. So my name is Scott, as Pastor Joe said, and most of you recognize me probably as Kim's husband, which is fine. She is my beautiful red-headed wife, and we usually sit right over there. That's her comfort zone. But she's been up here quite a bit, and I know she's watching, so I got to be careful with what I say. The reason you probably know Kim more than I is we have two drastically different personalities. I tend to ease my way into rooms, tend to walk in, survey what's happening, maybe pick out one or two people that I might say hi to, and until I get into my comfort zone. Kim, on the other hand, she comes in here with her hair on fire, and wants to meet everybody and know their stories in an hour by the time we leave. And she's really, really good at it. She is truly who I need in my life to push me out of my comfort zone, and I'm good for her to keep her from driving off a cliff sometimes. We've been together 37 years. Met when I was, 5. So how old does that make? No, we met in college. So we've been together 37 years, married this year for 33 of those years. Hasn't been easy. But as I tell her every year, it's been worth it. And every year she renews my 1-year contract, so we're still married. This story is going to be a little bit different than John's was a few weeks ago. I was not raised in the church. I was raised probably, some of you might view, as far away from the church as possible. This is kind of where I was raised. And truth be told, I was raised on a carnival lot. So I traveled most summers with my mom and my brother around the carnivals. We would go to Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, travel around, and yes, I do know how to win at all of the games. When I was young, in the 8 to 10-year-old range, I was used as a prop around the carnival. What does that mean? Well, on Fridays and Saturdays, that's when when all the high school kids and college kids come to the carnival or come to the fair, and they're walking around, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, and they see this 8 to 10-year-old little boy walking around with this huge stuffed animal. And some of you may have been victim to this. And they say, "Wow, where did you get that?" "Oh, I won this over there." And pretty soon the gal says, "Well, if that little boy can win it. Certainly you can win it for me. And so off they would go and spend their money. Then I graduated, and I actually got to work in the booths when I was about anywhere between 10 and 12, and then graduated to running the rides. And to this day, I still have a fear of my children on carnival rides. Not Disneyland. But understand, these were designed to set up and tear down quickly. So, anyway, so we would end the year typically at the UPLiFT Fair. Many of you are probably familiar with that, and then we would find a place to live, wherever we could find a place. And then I would go to the school that was closest to where we were living, and I never went to the same school 2 years in a row until high school. When I turned about 15, that slowed down. My mom met my stepfather, who, as you can imagine, at that time in my life, I was a model child, model teenager, as most 15-year-olds are. And now I was moving in with a man that I really didn't care for, nor did I respect, and I was in his house under his rules. And in hindsight, he was the definition of a saint. Because had they found me dead, he would have been released by justifiable homicide, I'm sure. In high school, I was a 3-sport athlete at a large high school on the west side of the state in Redmond, Washington. I played football, wrestling, baseball. I was, all league, blah, 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 whatever. And I was on the honor roll. I was admitted into the Naval Academy. I was going to be a pilot for the Navy. And I was also had a scholarship to go to Eastern here in Cheney to wrestle and on an academic scholarship. Seems pretty perfect. What my family didn't know is that by 9th grade, I was drinking every other day, if not more often. I did just about every drug that was available. I was raised in the 80s, so that's what we did. I did have a limit. I didn't use any drugs that were injected into my body because, of course, I was smarter than that, right? Most of my church going at the time was chasing whatever girl I was interested in. If she was going to church or youth group, I was going, and that was it. That was my exposure to it. My theme song was Billy Joel, Only the Good Die Young. So my senior year, I went for my physical to the Naval Academy, and they said, you can't be a pilot because you have astigmatism, which in 1985 was a disqualifying factor. Today, not such a big deal. So, of course, that devastated me. And then, so I decided to go to Eastern and wrestle, and then and study biology and sports medicine, eventually applying to PT school, physical therapy school. First year at Eastern, the wrestling program got canceled. So did my scholarship. So now what am I going to do? Because I can't afford to go to college. So needless to say, I was angry because everything that I loved or cared about was systematically being taken away from me. Fast forward, Kim and I met. She stood me up a couple of times, but I persisted. Anyway, we fell in love. I did graduate from Eastern, and we did get married. We were married by a judge, a literal judge, who really didn't even know our names. I'm not kidding. He messed up on our names in our ceremony. That's kind of where we were at. We ended up moving to Chicago for grad school, for my grad school, and then we've lived in Boise, Albuquerque, and Emporia, Kansas. And on a map, if you look at Kansas, if you find nowhere, and then just go to the left of that, that's where Emporia is. I lived downwind from IBP, which is Iowa Beef Packing Plant. That was fun. Of course, we found our way back here. I found a job. Kim finished her degree because she put her degree on hold so that we could move. Kids came, and then Kim felt an urge to go to church. She felt an urge to find a church. But my story continues in the church realm as I'd been burned by a few different churches that we had gone to, and I just had a disdain for organized religion because at the time we were young parents. I was working 60-plus hours a week. I was living off caffeine, and I was being told by the church that I wasn't serving enough, praying enough, studying enough, doing enough. And it just really gave me a bad taste. But God kept after me, thankfully. And at this time, I was playing fairly competitive racquetball. I was an A player, and I'm a fairly competitive person by nature. And I was at North Park at the Y playing, and I had a gentleman knock on the window while I was playing. I was just practicing, and he stuck his head in and said, "Hey, do you mind if we play?" This gentleman's name, some of you might know him, is Kim Pradisic. Yeah. And I really had just a limited number of people that I would play with because I wanted somebody at my level, and he didn't really look the type, but I said okay, and quite frankly, he was terrible. And we ended soon. The match was over soon, and of course, then afterwards, I'm packing my stuff up, and he says what Kim usually says is, "So you going to church?" Oh, here we go. So I listened to him, and I said, "Yeah, whatever." I said all the right things, and he was on his way. That was on a Saturday. The next day, Kim says to me, "Hey, I found this little community church. I'm going to take the kids. You want to go?" "Nope, not going." "Go ahead." And so she went. She came back and said, the music was great. The service was great. It was so moving that I even went up for an altar call with our son Tanner at the time. And I rolled my eyes and continued to watch football. And so now the next week comes around. She's going to go back, and she asked me to go. So I reluctantly said, "Okay, I'll go." I walk in, sit down, blend in the middle, hiding behind the tallest person I can find. And I look up on the stage, and there's the worship leader. It's the guy that I was playing racquetball with about 8 or 9 days ago. So music starts, and he starts playing, and in Kim fashion, he stops right in the middle of the first song, and he points. "You, I played racquetball with you last week." Great. So much for just blending in. And I'm not going to say that I had this aha Jesus moment. I've searched in the past, and I don't really find one. I kind of equate myself more to a crock pot that has been put on low, and you put the roast beef in the morning with the carrots and the potatoes and the seasoning, and then you leave it all day long, and it just simmers. And that's kind of been my experience over the years, is just this simmering. But that was the beginning. And God continued to be patient with me. And as John alluded to a couple weeks ago, Kim, my wife, and I, we got asked to go on a retreat, similar to the one that John and his wife went on. And I came up with just about every excuse in the book not to go. I had changed careers by this time, and so it was either the start of our busy season, or we were preparing for the next busy season. That was my excuse as to why we couldn't go. For 2 years, I made excuses. Until finally, my wife says, "I'm going, with or without you. You need to decide." So I did what all good husbands do, and I went. And I can tell you that the crock pot went from simmer to high at that point. This retreat was, as I express it, it was nothing of what I expected and everything that I needed at the time. So if there was an aha moment, that was kind of it. Since then, Kim and I have always been, we were part of a church then. We've continued to be part of a church. We were part of a church plant. here in Spokane. And then a few years ago, we were in a transition. We had sold our house. We were building a different house. I was living in the apartments right over here. Wonderful to get back into an apartment again. And Kim was living up at the lake, and we wandered over here one Sunday, and right before the pandemic hit. But we've been coming ever since, and really love being a part of this family, even though I've been pretty shy and haven't introduced myself to everybody. Now you know who I am. But enough about me. Ask you a question. How many have ever heard hearing from God? I got 2 hands up in this. I'm going to date myself here when I talk about this, but I think a lot of you can relate. Most of the time, I feel like my connection to God is one of those old radios in your car where you had the tuning dials and you had the black tabs in the middle. Okay, and if you didn't have it just right, you'd hear a bunch of static. I often wish that I could, when I do have those moments when I am tuned in, that I could pull one of those black tabs out. You remember how you used to have to set the radio station? You'd pull the black tab out, and then you'd push it all the way in, and then it was set. So that no matter where I ended up with, I could just push that button, and I'd be dialed in. Ever so often I get that. Most of the time I get hit upside the head with a 2x4 by God. That pretty much happens more often than not. And there was this time when we were going to a different church where I was really struggling with the gifts of the Spirit. Okay? And there was a big emphasis at this church on the gifts of the Spirit and speaking in tongues or praying in tongues. And I just wasn't getting there. And I didn't understand it. And one day I was sitting at the lake, and I was just tossing pebbles off the dock into the water, and the ripples caught my eye. And I basically kind of dawned on me that your little act can cause amazing ripples, and you don't have to have this big, profound gift to be an agent of God, if you will. Okay, so I started thinking about this. Of course, God didn't give me the answers right away like I wanted, but He eventually led me to Matthew 25:31 through 40, and it's only going to be the first half. But this is the parable of the goats and the sheep, and I'm just going to read the text here. When the Son of Man comes in His glory, and all the angels with Him, He will sit on the throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before Him, and He will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And He will put the sheep on His right and the goats on His left. Then the King will say to those on His right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer Him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit?" The King will reply, "I tell you the truth. Whatever you did for the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." Okay, I got it. I'm reading it, trying to understand it. That's fine and dandy. Then He took me to the Lord's Prayer. And also in Matthew, Jesus instructs His disciples, I think it's Matthew 6. Help me out here a little bit. 6 something, 13, something like that. Jesus instructs His disciples on how to pray. Now, we're all familiar with this prayer to the point where I'm guilty. We probably have said it enough to where we just don't even really think about what it means. And this is definitely the gospel according to Scott. Just going to preface that right now because I am not a theologian in any way, shape, or form. But just the first few sections, it's we all know it. It's Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So we're going to stop right there. Let's just kind of think about what I said there. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. What is God's will? I ask myself that quite a bit. And how are we supposed to have God's will on earth as it is in heaven? Which takes me back to Matthew 25:40. Whatever you've done for the least of these, you have done for me. So what's our role in all of this? What can we do? We're only one person. But we are charged by the Lord's Prayer and the parable of the goat and the sheep to do God's will on earth as he would do in heaven. Do for the least, and you have done for me. I've kind of gotten into, I've read some people's interpretations of this, and it just really kind of wraps my mind around an axle, and I get really confused. So I like to keep it simple. And I think God just wants us to figure out how to show people heaven here on earth. Because isn't that God's wishes, that everybody would be in heaven for eternity? But if they can't experience it, or experience just a little bit of it, how are they going to seek it? How are they going to go after it? We need to bring heaven to earth. On a few weeks ago, Pastor Joe was up here and he talked about challenging us to use our talents. When we hear that, I don't know about you, but I used to get confused in that it was using our talents at church. Use our talents at church. That was what I was kind of wrapped up in, as opposed to using it for the church. Okay? And I thought I was supposed to be speaking or singing, and trust me, you don't want to hear that. Or playing an instrument, which I cannot do. And I'm not much of a greeter, as you've probably gotten by my the fact that I am not my wife, and she loves to greet. But I don't have a gift of prophecy that I'm aware of. I don't have a gift of tongues. So what am I supposed to do in all of this? But I lost the simple meaning that our talents are to be used for the church, not necessarily for us, and not necessarily here within these walls. Joe often talks that, this is just a building, and that we come here to be fed, but it's our responsibility once we leave to do the feeding. After that, something as simple as taking a friend to coffee. We've all kind of heard this before. See how they're doing, wrapping the granola bars that we do. That's all of those things. Or just saying hi to somebody that you don't even know, or smiling at them can change the trajectory of their day, let alone their life. This became apparent to me when I was at work, and a gentleman from Gonzaga University came in with a project. See, he had been to Africa, and he had found that the clay in this particular village, if you mold it and dry it, it has the spacing between the grains is just perfect enough to drain, or to capture all of the bacteria and microbes in the water in that particular area in that village. And so he was headed to Ethiopia, or he was headed to Africa, and he needed a mold so that he could take a hydraulic press, which he was going to completely break down, and he was going to press this clay and form this filter that would fit into a 5-gallon bucket, similar to like a Home Depot 5-gallon bucket, so that the villagers could go and get the water and pour it in. They wouldn't have to boil it. They could just pour it into the top of this and filter through so that they could have clean drinking water. And here I am. he comes to me and says, I need help making this mold. I changed careers now, and he needed help making this mold because he had this big project he was doing. And I'm thinking, well, I've got 2 kids. Remember, it's either the busy season, we're preparing for the busy season, and I couldn't go, but I could help. I could help him design this mold, which we did, which he took and was able to accomplish this for that village. This then led to me being part of, now keep in mind, this gentleman just came to me and needed something, but this led to me becoming part of a microfinance group in Ethiopia, where and I don't know, is anybody familiar with a microfinance group? Okay, so what it is it's a group of people that basically we put in about $10 or $20 a piece, and we become a bank. But it's a donation, and we go down and we set up the bank so that the Ethiopian people, they control who they give loans to within their village. The people pay it back, and these are $5, $10 loans, $20 loans. These aren't big loans here, and they, but eventually, and they're the ones that are accountable for the money, and eventually they collect the interest, which then feeds the bank, and the monies grow so that they can give out more loans. And these are loans for people to, for instance, one gentleman wanted to start a business where he bought 2 car batteries and a generator and some gasoline and some connections for cell phones. And his business model was he was going to be the charging station. Because in Ethiopia, believe it or not, I went to some of these villages, there's no running water, there's no electricity, there's no nothing, but they have cell phones. Because cell phone towers can be put up anywhere. So these people would have to walk to the village to pay this gentleman to charge their cell phone. That was his business model. So as part of this microfinance group, and went to Ethiopia and got to see how these have become completely self-sustainable. So they run them now. There's no longer any input from us whatsoever. They're accountable for the money. And one thing we learned very quickly was that women pay back their loans way better than men in Ethiopia. Just keep that in the back of your mind. So that just gave just a glimmer of, for us it was a very small act. For them it was life-changing for them. People were able to, because in the educational system in Ethiopia, the schooling's not what's expensive, it's the test to go to the next grade level the next year. So at the end of the year, they have to pay to take a test to be able to graduate to the next year. Well, many families can't afford the test, so their children just stop at grade 3, grade 4, and don't go any further. But this whole system allows them to create an economy within their village, and then hopefully their children can advance beyond them. That's all of our goals, is for our children to advance beyond us. Anyway, so there's that. Another thing that you can do is you can take a passion that you have and turn it into a real life demonstration of God's love and sacrifice. This has been seen with quilting, knitting scarves or hats or blankets. Even though I couldn't be a pilot in the Navy, I still had a passion for flying. And when our youngest daughter went to college, my wife said, Kim said, didn't you always want to be a pilot? I said, yes. She said, you better do it now because you're not getting any younger. And so I did. And so that's been a passion of mine, and I've taken that to fly for an organization called Angel Flight. Is anybody familiar with Angel Flight? Okay. So I fly for Angel Flight West, which is the Western chapter of this nationwide group of pilots that we fly non-medical emergency personnel or patients for treatment. I've flown people for cancer treatment. Usually this is to larger cities where they need to get the treatment, so they might live in a rural community, or they might or the cost of travel might just be too prohibitive due to the frequency. There's one lady in Kalispell that had to go to Seattle every week. I'd pick her up on Sunday afternoon and she was there Monday through Friday, and then pick her up and bring her back Friday night so that she could be with her family on the weekends. She had to do this for 8 weeks straight. So non-medical transportation and or non-emergency medical transportation. I've flown adults seeking cancer treatment, teens receiving cognitive therapy. In fact, a funny story. I took Kim with me on one of these trips, and we flew to Boise. The people were in Ogden, Utah, and so one pilot was going to fly them from Ogden up to Boise, and then we were going to fly them from Boise back to Feltz Field here in Spokane. And so we're sitting in the Boise airport in the FBO there waiting, and I get a call from the pilot saying, I've got plane trouble. I'm not going to be able to take him. What do you want to do? Should I buy him an airline ticket to get him home? And I said to Kim, I said, what do you want to do? She said, well, we got all day, so let's pick him up. So we flew down to Ogden and met them, got in the plane. The boy was 15 or 16, so he sat up in the front with me, and Kim and the mom sat in the back. And within about 3 minutes, Kim and the mom, of course, figured out that they knew each other, and because that's what Kim does. And we had actually been praying for her son, for his treatment, and didn't even know it. And so if any of you've been in a small plane, all four headsets, we can all hear everybody, and Kim and the mom were just in the back just talking, and I couldn't hear what ATC was telling me, so I had to mute them, and muted them, and her son was like, oh, thank you so much. But anyway, so we it's those types of things. So I take a passion. I'm very blessed to be able to fly, but I also feel even more blessed to transport these people, where I get to pray for them. I don't know their name until I meet them, but I get to pray for them before I pick them up. I get to pray for them while we're flying. They don't even know it. This picture here was a mom and her 4-year-old son in the back. Obviously during COVID, he needed to get to Seattle for some treatment. So I get to pray for them. They may some are receptive, some aren't. That's okay. Doesn't matter. We just do what we can. The last thing that I want to share with you is I read a book recently called Humankind. It's about being both human and kind, and it talks about the ripple effect. So it just kind of hit me because that's kind of where my mind goes. And there's 3 stories. I'm just going to tell you real quickly. One was a gentleman that and how people's simple acts changed the course of these people's lives, and how they and then affected people's lives. One gentleman was homeless. He had lost everything, had some medical bills, lost his home, was living in his car, and to the point where 3 days in his car without food, he finally gave in and walked into a diner, and he had to get some food. So he ordered some food. He knew he couldn't pay for it. Ate his meal, and when the bill came, he started looking around on the floor. Got under the table, looking on the floor, looking for his wallet that he lost. To the point where the cook came out from behind the counter and was down on the floor looking with him for this mysterious wallet that he knew he didn't have. And the cook said, "Oh, you must be looking for this," and handed the guy $20 to pay for his meal. Well, everybody knew what was going on. He paid for his meal and he left. But he vowed at that point that at some point in his life, when he got back up on his feet, he was going to pay it forward, if you will, or make a difference. Well, he ended up starting the Secret Santa organization, which is a worldwide organization, years later, and even went back and met this cook at the diner just to explain to him how he had, changed the course of his life by that simple act. The second story that struck me, some of you may know this name, little boy named Jimmy, and I'll get to his last name in a little bit. He was in 3rd grade, and he was terrified to go to school every day because he was afraid that his shoes would become untied. Now, you might think, well, 3rd graders should know how to tie their shoe. And that's true, except for Jimmy had one problem. Jimmy only had one hand. So for him, tying his shoe or shoes was impossible. His mom would tie them in several knots before he would go to school every morning. Hopefully they didn't get untied, and his teacher would then tie his shoes if they did, to obviously Jimmy's embarrassment. Until one day, the teacher showed up to class with his students, and he said to Jimmy, "I figured it out." And Jimmy kind of looked at him. He said, "Just come with me." So he set a movie on for the rest of the class, and he went out in the hallway. The teacher had figured out how to tie a shoe with one hand, and he was going to teach Jimmy how to do this, and he did. So Jimmy could now tie his shoe with one hand. And that changed the course of Jimmy's life, because what Jimmy realized was, whatever obstacle I'm faced with, I can overcome it. Jimmy pitched for the University of Michigan and went on to sign with the California Angels. Eventually was traded to or maybe he was a free agent, I can't remember, to the New York Yankees, pitched a no-hitter, Jim Abbott. So that teacher, working after school, figuring out how to tie a shoe with one hand, taught Jimmy that he could do anything he wanted to. And he became a major league pitcher. Jim Abbott became a role model for other children that had physical limitations, to the point where he affected an MMA fighter who had one hand, who again, so the ripple effect continues. The last one is a little more personal. So there's a lady, and she's in a grocery store, and she is checking out, and the checker there has plans after work, and the lady says, that's going through the line, says, I don't know why, but I just think you need to be told that you matter. And it struck the checker. The lady didn't know why, but the checker had plans after work to commit suicide. But because of what this lady said to her, she didn't. And she started an organization called You Matter. And she has these cards, which are free if you go to her website, and she challenges everybody to approach anybody, a family member, and just let them know that they matter. So I'm going to tell each and every one of you that you matter. And I've got cards up here. There's 250 of them. They say you matter on them. They're here for anybody that wants to take them. They'll just be up here for whenever you want. So change the course of her life, literally and figuratively, and it could change the course of somebody else's life. So if the worship team wants to come forward. So in summary, we're charged to show people what heaven is by showing them the glimpse of it here on earth. Jesus never said that those that you give food to, invite in, or give something to drink had to be believers. In fact, remember, Jesus hung out with sinners, non-believers, and he showed them a glimpse of what heaven was or could be on earth. Remember, it doesn't have to be a great act, although those can be awesome. But small acts can change someone's direction and show them that there's something more, that they too can change the trajectory of somebody's life, and the ripple effect continues. And I'll use a flying analogy. If I'm off by 1 degree in the direction that I'm headed in 100 miles, I'll be 84 miles away from where I should have been. So if you just alter somebody's life 1 degree, think of where they might be a year from now, 10 years from now. And again, I've got the cards up here. I'll leave them up here. Take them if you want. And thank you for listening.